I'm Harry Glurkian, and this is Moneyball Medicine, the interview podcast where we meet researchers, entrepreneurs, and physicians who are using the power of data to improve patient health and make healthcare delivery more efficient. You can think of each episode as a new chapter in the never-ending audio version of my 2017 book, Moneyball Medicine, Thriving in the New Data-Driven Healthcare Market. Vangelis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
So, it's interesting. I was looking at the company and looking at what you guys are doing, and I've probably talked to, close to 70 experts in different areas of healthcare, drug discovery, computer science. Out of all those people, I honestly think you and your company, Intelligencia, might be the most exact reflection of the argument I was making in my 2017 book, Moneyball Medicine. Yep. In fact, I actually think you used Moneyball metaphor in your own talks. So I want to start out with having you explain the parallels between your company and what Billy Beane did at the Oakland A's.
It's very funny you say this, Harry, by the way. When we started the company, 33 and a half years ago now, we had a slide actually. Baseball did it in the 90s. Is it about time that healthcare does the same? And going through the Moneyball analogy. Look, the quick or the easiest way to explain it, right? It's the analogy of how do you pick baseball players and build a winning baseball team? And how do you pick drug candidates and development programs and build a winning pipeline? Back in the day, what baseball did is a lot of experts in a big conference room, and these guys have watched, and I say guys because, they were primarily guys. They watched, thousands of baseball games each, and they had their own perspectives and views and biases and experience in terms of who's a good baseball player and who's not, and who they want on the team and how do they complement each other. And that's how they built baseball team. And, the kid comes in, the chubby kid, I think Jonah Hill, right? On the
Yes,
booth,
yes.
and tells Brad Pitt or Billy Beane in real life, hey, I think we can do this differently. And that's a little bit of the analogy here. Look, it's not a perfect analogy like everything, right? Yeah. But the analogy here is, how do you go from when you design a clinical trial or when you think about the pros and cons and the risks of a development program, how do you take that conversation from a room full of people, the oncology PhD, the statistician, the person who's developed dozens of drugs of drugs in the past and so on, and you inject some data science and machine learning capability into that conversation. There is art in drug development. We'll be the first one to acknowledge that, and same way there's art in baseball. So I would not expect that that room gets replaced by a machine in any shape or form, and definitely not in the near or even medium future. But the idea is, if you have 10 people in the room, can you pull up an 11th chair, have the machine learning algorithm sit at that chair, and provide a very unbiased, data-driven perspective into that conversation? So that's what we do.
So I want to get into some of the details, but I want to step back and fill in some history here for the people and how Intelligencia got started. If I'm not mistaken, your background is computer science, not biology, right?
Correct.
Okay. And your co-founder, Dimitrios, is trained in law.
Yep.
So you both spent times at McKinsey. Is that where you guys met?
Yeah, so we it's a good both of those good points. So you have a former lawyer, which we don't hold against him. We still like him very, very much. A former computer scientist or electrical engineer who are running a company in drug development. Like, how does that work? A couple of things. As you rightly pointed out, we met at McKinsey. We were both part of the healthcare practice there. Initially, I was in the US. Dimitrios was in Europe. We met 10 years before starting the company, just running or in a client project together. We kept in touch over the years. And at some point, I think it was 2014, Dimitrios moved to New York, moved to the US with McKinsey, and took some AI responsibilities there as well. McKinsey was doing some internal AI, I think it was called McKinsey Solutions or something like that. So we became closer when he was in New York. We were both in healthcare for the better part of the last decade or dozen years. And we were looking for what is the opportunity, what's the area in drug development, or frankly in pharma more broadly, where we believe we can have an impact. And it was partly us thinking through different areas. It was frankly customers or clients coming. We were both at McKinsey, and we have done this study over and over again, right? How do you design a better clinical trial? How do you? I had done this, I don't know, 24 times, maybe more. And clients kept asking McKinsey or us, hey guys, we understand how you do this and you do it very well, but are you using machine learning? Are you using data? And after saying no for about 50 times, we said, okay, we should stop saying no and just go build the damn business. So here we are.
Yeah, no, I know that. I mean, from my days at having Scienti advisors, they ask over and over and over again, and you keep it's great profitability, by the way, but because you sort of know the answer. But you couldn't have picked a harder space, though. This is not a trivial exercise, especially if you go back to 2014, where some of the data was not even truly available, or not in a format, or not labeled, or right, to where we are today.
Yeah. Still not. We started the company in basically 2018. The biggest challenge, I think you rightly put it, it's getting your hands on the right data you need to answer the question you want to answer. We took that view, by the way, and some people go differently, and I'll have my biases, my own biases, I'll admit. In a lot of places, what we've seen, particularly some big pharma, because they're sitting on a vast amount of their own data, but whether it's CTMS data or whatever clinical trial data they have, and the exercise they mentally do is, okay, I have all this data, what questions can I answer? What can I do? And there's a lot of value there. You can answer a lot of good questions. But sometimes the question you ask needs more data than what you have, and you're kind of force fitting it a little bit and say, yeah, okay, but maybe I can answer most of it. Well, not really. So we flipped it. We asked the question. The question is, what is the risk of this clinical development program? Or the flip side of it, how likely is it that this clinical program or this drug will eventually reach a patient, will eventually receive approval by the FDA and be used by a patient? Then we went and we said, okay, if that's the question, what data do we need to answer that question? Some of it, very easily accessible. Some of it, doable, but you need to build data pipelines, you need to clean it up, it's a little bit messy, whatever. Some of it doesn't exist, we got to build it from scratch. So if you do it the other way and say, what do I have? You'll ignore that piece that says doesn't exist, I have to build it from scratch. You're going to try to solve the problem with the other stuff, and then you realize it's not enough. So we asked the question, and then we went very systematically to get all the data we needed to train the machine learning models to answer that question.
Sounds like a consulting approach for sure.
Well,
what do we need to fill the 2x2 and get it to be? So I totally get it. What are the biggest limitations you see right now from pharma's current method of assessing clinical trial risk?
Yeah, there's a few, and some are bigger, some are smaller, and it's hard to paint the whole industry with a broad brush. But there are some technical limitations that everybody has. Like as a humanity, as a scientific community, do we really understand drug biology really well, human biology? I don't know. We understand it well enough, but from the total knowledge, biological knowledge, we probably know this much. That's one challenge, and it's a technical challenge or a scientific challenge. A technical challenge is, and I think you put your finger on it, data availability, but it goes beyond, can I get my hands on the right data? Is it curated in a particular way? Is it well annotated? Is it labeled? Does it have the same quality? Is it consistent? I take data from this genomic database, and I take data from that genomic database. Are they structured the same way? Can I combine them, or how much work do I need to do to combine them? Now, that's a solvable problem. The understanding biology, it is solvable over time, but not immediate. The technical aspect of can I make data consistent, solvable, incredibly painful, and very few people have the patience for it, or are willing to. I mean, we've killed a lot of brain cells pulling that data together, but we've done it. And then there's a third group, I think, of challenges that I would put in the broader, cultural umbrella. There is what I call the every drug is unique syndrome. A lot of people out there will say, well, there's so many differences between drugs and programs and all that. There's no way you can use machine learning to estimate the success of this drug, given how unique it is. Part of that is true. Most of it not true, actually. So there's that syndrome. There is the, and it's actually very interesting in the pharma industry, particularly, or in biotech. There is the, I want to see very quick results. I want to try this AI thing, whatever this AI thing is. Let me try it for 2-3 months, show something quick. If I can show us a quick win, great. If not, I'll throw it away. I don't have the patience for it. And this is an industry that will easily don't even think about investing 10 years and $1 billion to develop, forget clinical, in the preclinical world, to discover a new target or a new molecule that could cure Alzheimer's or pancreatic cancer or something. So we are an industry that we're very much into putting an enormous amount of resources, time, patience to discover a drug. But when it comes to incorporating an AI system, methodology, model that may help us tremendously, we are impatient. 3 months, let's see what I can do. Oh, no results, throw it away. I'll never see it again. And it is a little bit of this there. And I think, in all fairness, companies are getting better. So most of the large pharma, they have now chief digital officers or chief innovation officers with a whole structure underneath them and mandates and all that. So I don't want to be too pessimistic here, right? There's a lot of effort, and I think the industry, at the very least, has acknowledged they have a cultural barrier that needs to be overcome. But I don't think we're fully there in how we overcome it. But we're making progress.
But it's interesting, right? So I look at existing big pharma and the lumbering ways they sort of move forward, right? In fits and starts. And, do I want to disrupt my kingdom to implement this thing? I mean, there's a lot of human psychology that's involved here, and a lack of understanding, right? Of fully understanding this and what it can do for them in different areas. Then I look at these startups that literally from day one are totally data purpose built. Right? Everything they're looking at is, what's the data? How do I label it? Where are we going to use it? How do I manipulate it? I mean, it is from the ground up. And I always think to myself, sooner or later, my bet is that the startup is going to outmaneuver the big guy, right? I mean, Google started as a purpose-built entity, and it outstrips most of its competitors. And reshapes industries. I always think it's harder to take an existing entity and reprogram its DNA rather than have a pre-designed piece of DNA from day one.
Harry, it's an incredibly interesting thought. And look, I don't have an answer for it, and only time will tell. I would expect some pharma companies, whether we're talking about big pharma, the big 10 or, the massive guys, or some of the, in our industry, it's very funny, like a mid-sized biotech, it's still a $20 billion business. But I would bet some of them will miss the train. Some of them, to use your words, will adapt, will reprogram their DNA to some degree, a little bit painfully. It's going to be a little bit slow. They're going to have some false starts, but somehow they'll get there. Some others will just buy. And we've seen this in the industry, right? So What do you do? Oh, interesting startup. I'll just buy them. And a few of these have already happened. We've seen, Flatiron was bought, I believe it was Roche, right?
Yes.
And there's many other similar examples, but that's probably one of the bigger ones, the more prominent ones. So I would expect this reprogramming of DNA will not fully happen organically. Some of it will happen by big pharma realizing, okay, we need to play, if we're not a data company in a few years from now, we'll be nowhere.
Right.
How do we get there? Let's get our stuff organized, and maybe we'll go make a couple of select acquisitions, and eventually we'll get there. So I think all of these flavors will materialize in some shape or form, and some companies will lose, some companies will do the right investments and hire the right people and make the right acquisitions, and they will continue to grow.
Yeah, and I look at it as an analogy to, like, if I look at, say, JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, I mean, the amount of money that they're spending trying to transition to this new capability is, we're not spending the same amount of money in pharma for sure.
Oh,
right?
Not even close.
Look, not even close.
I don't know the actual amount of money, right? So I don't want to, because I haven't done the analysis, I haven't seen numbers. But my former employer, McKinsey, has done quite a bit of work. I think it was MGI. So MGI is McKinsey's, let's say, think tank. It's the McKinsey Global Institute. They had done a lot of work on this. And I remember seeing a chart that I thought was mind-boggling to me. Areas that are way ahead in AI, or industries that are way ahead in AI. I would say financial services, so the Goldmans and JP Morgans and the Morgan Stanleys and so on of the world. High tech, of course, and a few others. Who's at the bottom? I think it was like building materials or construction, which, okay, I get it. Second from the bottom, healthcare. It was literally that bad. How is that possible? Well, it's true if you look at the data. The sad thing for me, or the part that we need to think about as an industry, is the promise or the impact that AI can have in healthcare. And I'm talking about healthcare more broadly now, including hospitals and payers, not just drug development or pharma. But the impact that AI can have on healthcare is enormous. It's in the trillions.
Yes.
But in terms of AI adoption, we are right above construction. And no offense to construction, but it's not the most innovative industry out there.
So this is why I love investing in this area, and because it's such an incredible, I mean, some of the other opportunities are still incredible, don't misunderstand me, but this is at its nascent stage in my mind, where the opportunity is dramatic to sort of move the ball forward. Okay, which brings me to the next question, which is, and you don't have to name any names or anything like that, but walk us through sort of a real world example of how you help a client in practice.
Ooh, maybe I'll give you two examples. You asked for one, I'll give you two.
Okay.
There are actually, I can give you more, but let's start with that. So where do we typically, we work with several flavors of customers, right? So we serve some of the largest, top 5 big pharma companies. We serve some of the smaller, even private biotechs, and we serve a bunch of the, the mid-sized biotechs or mid-sized pharma companies. One area that comes, or one example is specific program. So I'll pick an actual example. So it's a phase 2 asset or a phase 2 program. It was a combination program, I believe, for pancreatic cancer that our client was running. It was the phase 2 had been going on for about a year, I want to say. So it was in the middle of phase 2. They were starting to see some interim results. They hadn't published anything. They were starting to see some interim results, but they were still waiting for the phase 2 to complete. And then there were basically 3 questions with increasing degrees of difficulty, if you will. Question number 1, how likely is it that this program, so this combo, so our molecule with, I believe it was chemo for pancreatic cancer, will eventually reach a patient, will eventually receive regulatory approval by the FDA? That was question number 1, which is our bread and butter. This is what our algorithms do. And we answered, and we said, I'll make up the number now. It's 13%, which, by the way, for pancreatic cancer phase 2, that's not bad. The second question was, okay, now let's start thinking forward. So if at the end of phase 2, we're able to show ABC, how does that probability change? Because given the interim results we've seen, we have pretty decent conviction we'll be able to show something in that range when it comes to OS or ORR or whatever endpoints we're measuring.
Yep.
So if we were able to show this, what will our probability change to? It's 13 now, will it go to 20 or will it go to 3? What if we manage to show something better or something worse? So in that sense, we're trying to calibrate and say, how do we, based on what we show at the end of phase 2, how do we make a decision, should we go to phase 3 or not? Is it too risky still and it needs to be de-risked further? Or are we comfortable with the risk we're taking and we're willing to write a $200 million check to run a phase 3 program? So we did the simulations, if you will, the analysis to say, based on what your phase 2 will show, here's what you should expect your risk to be at the beginning of phase 3. That was the second layer. The third layer went even a step further and said, okay, let's assume we are now comfortable moving forward. So the risk is within what we're willing to take, given the size of the prize, right? Because if you do get this drug approved, we estimate an enormous commercial potential. So we're willing to take significant risk here. But how should we do this? So help us think through how different choices for continuing our development program affect our chances for approval. For example, should we run a smaller phase 2B and then 2 large phase 3 trials? Should we scrap the phase 2B, go straight to pivotal phase 3 and do a much larger trial? And there are different trade-offs there that have to do with cost, time, and risk. So, right. So we help them think through from the middle of phase 2 where they are today, how likely is it that they'll get approved? How will that evolve once they publish results? And if they decide to move forward, what the best path forward is from a risk point of view. So that's one example. Well, I'll spare you the second one. I spent too long on the first one. So I don't know if
so you've written this, you've written this machine learning model for predicting clinical trial success, right? So, and if I'm not, I want to say there's at least 100 factors across areas like clinical trial design, choice of outcomes, signal of regulatory process, the biology itself, as you mentioned, right? The history. You have to train a model like that. Where did you get the data to train this complex model?
Yep. Oh God. There's no single, so I wish there was. So we've been to now dozens of data sources. So I think what I said at the very beginning, right? Some of the data was easy to get. So for example, there is a bunch of data that clinicaltrials.gov has available. Yep. Of course, we have that, and everybody else has that. That's very easy to get, right? Valuable, but very easy to get, which is good. There is some data where you need to, it's publicly available, but you need to spend a lot of time cleaning up and curating. So think of genomic databases, whether it's TCGA or GTEx or dozens of other genomic databases. That needs a lot of analyses and a lot of processing and a lot of cleanup before you create features out of that data to put in your machine learning algorithms. So that's probably a second group. And a third group goes back to the point initially that not all the data you want to answer the question is available. So you have to build it yourself. We built it ourselves. So an example there is clinical trial outcomes. So there is no, to our knowledge, and we looked hard, there is no data you can buy that has, in an incredibly consistent, systematic way, all the outcomes of clinical trials in a particular therapeutic area for the last 20 years. So let's say I'm in oncology. I'll give you an example, right? There's been a few thousand trials in the last 20 years, let's say since 2000. We need to know every endpoint that this trial measured, how many patients were in each patient cohort or in each arm of the trial, what was the value of that endpoint, what ORR did they achieve, what OS did they achieve, whatever. When was that? Because sometimes you say OS, overall survival. Well, was it measured as 6 months or 12 months? So you need one layer more of specificity of exactly how that endpoint was captured. And then you need the number. How many patients survived at the 6-month mark or whatever it is. So there's all that stuff that you need. And then you need it not just for the trial or the program you're assessing. That's easy to do, right? It's one program. We can get it from the pharma company themselves. We need it for every single trial that has ever succeeded in the past, and for every single trial that has ever failed. That's how you train a machine learning algorithm. That was very painful. We have a whole team in Athens, actually. So if the name didn't give it up, I'm from Greece originally. I've been in New York for like 25 years now, but I'm from Greece originally. So a lot of the team is based in Greece. And part of that team, they're very highly educated team, and PhDs in biology, oncology, immunology, pharmacology, all the ologies. And that team curates in an incredibly systematic way all that data before our data engineers and before our machine learning team can take over to build models.
Right.
So to answer your question in a short way, dozens of data sources, some easy to get, some much harder with a lot of processing, and some we had to just create from scratch.
I mean, I was just thinking about what you were saying, that last piece we were just discussing. I mean, I can imagine to hospitals and to doctors, that would be, if you could put that into an interesting matrix, they could get a interesting view into these drugs, and instead of memorizing off the top of their head. I always find all these discussions with companies that have data, I can think of 5 other things to do easily. Once you've got the data source, things you can
there's
do
a lot
with
of things.
it.
Look, and we've been discussing internally, both as a team, but also with our advisors and even our customers at this point, where they're coming to us and they're saying, "Hey guys, that's amazing what you have. We'll pay you money. Great. Can we now do this? Can we now do that? Now do that?" And some of that we'd love to do, and we're entertaining it. Some of it, we're still a growing company, or there's 40 of us total in the company. You also don't want to get distracted by too many shiny objects. So we're trying to find the right shiny object and focus on a couple of them, but not too many. So for some of them, we'll say, look, we could do it, but we can't. We don't have the time. We don't have the bandwidth today, maybe later. Some of them we say, yeah, that's incredibly interesting. And we were planning to go there anyway. Let's do it faster together. So we're discussing with one of our customers today about building something that goes beyond risk and starts thinking about the commercial implications of what happens when a drug actually gets approved. So it's not just predicting approval, but can you predict anything in the commercial space, whether that's revenue, reimbursement, market shares, and so on?
So I could almost answer that yes, because I know of a system a group that does that, and they actually do it very well. Okay. And it's funny because they're in New York, but
I'd love to meet them.
But let's think. If you had to say, what is your defensible advantage? It's your special sauce. Like, what is it that you're doing for pharma that they can't somehow reproduce for themselves?
That's a great question, Harry. I will say a couple of things. Some are softer, some are harder. On the softer side, and probably more important, by the way, is the persistence, focus, unrelenting pursuit of what we're here to build. In a larger company, it's too easy to lose focus, budgets get cut, people get reassigned, promoted, change departments, move. So it's very hard to get a team together to focus on something for an extended period of time and only do that. So that's probably one thing. When you compare to a larger pharma company, right? The second thing would be bringing together people with very different expertise and experiences. So if you go to our office in Athens, and not the last year, given all the mess we're all living in with coronavirus, but if you go to our office in Athens, either before that or hopefully very soon, it's a room, and you have the data scientist sitting here, the oncology PhD is right next to her, right across the data engineer, the drug developer is sitting over there, the statistician is there. So it's literally having all those people in one room, or in a series of rooms in one floor, let's say, where they work together on the same topic. And it sounds a little bit mundane and it sounds a little trite, whatever. It makes a difference. It makes a difference for the biologist to be listening into, as these computer scientists or data scientists are talking about their models. And I'm sitting here entering all the biological clinical data from this New England Journal of Medicine article that I'm reading. I actually understand how they use it, and I can offer an idea. I can say, hey, I think actually I can capture it in a way that will help you guys, given what you're discussing. So all those things help. So that's the second element, which is a team of, we use diversity in many ways. So a diverse team, not just in the racial or any other perspective, but also in experiences and backgrounds. And the third one, which is the more technical one, it's the data we actually do have. So it does take an enormous amount of time, a lot of people, an enormous amount of effort to actually build and create the data cube that we have. Nobody else has this. It's incredibly painful. I don't wish it to anybody, but we've done it. So that does set us apart. There are companies out there that are trying to solve the same or very similar questions or answer very similar questions based on a much more limited set of data, and they fall short. They're okay, but they fall short of our predictive power, not because they're not doing anything wrong, not because they're not good data scientists. All of those things are fine. They just don't have the data that we have. And
so that brings me to that next question, right? Because and I know in all of these models, there's little issues fraught throughout the process of,
oh my God, there's so many, and some of them are
so many, right, that you have to think through, right? That's why whenever somebody says, oh yeah, I've got the perfect answer, I'm like, it's impossible. Perfect? Yep. No, right? So what is the accuracy? I mean, if you said your predictive algorithm, how do you, first of all, what do you compare it against? And then let me just pick and say, if I was, putting it against a traditional way of making decisions, how do you measure your accuracy? And then do you go back and look at real world evidence versus the system?
Yeah. So we've done a few things that are very interesting. There is a standard metric for machine learning. So let's not get too technical. I don't know how technical your audience is, but there's the AUC, which is area under the curve, which means the area under the ROC curve, which is the receiver characteristic or whatever. There's a metric called AUC. It's pretty much a number between 0.5 and 1. I mean, technically it could be below 0.5, but that's a silly. So it's a number between 0.5 and 1. The higher it is, the more predictive your model is.
Yep.
We are in the high 80s, low 90s, which is incredibly predictive for a problem this nuanced and this hard. If you do image recognition and you use deep learning for image recognition, you get close to 0.999.
Right.
These are very different problems. So with a standard AUC metric, we score very highly. And we've compared that with what others have published in literature. And we're higher than at least what we've seen published by others. Then you do obvious things, right? So what do? You say, okay, let me take an example of 100 trials or 100 programs for which my algorithm predicts that they are, let's say, in the 20 to 30% success, right? So my algorithm says all of these 100 fall in the 20 to 30% range. Now let me follow them over time and see what happens. What do you want? Ideally, you want 25% of them to succeed, somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And most often than not, that's what happens. So when we say 0 to 10, on average, let's say 7% of them succeed. When we say 10 to 30, on average, 22% succeed. When we say 30 to 50, on average, 39% succeed. So you do that on a large amount of trials, and then you start gaining confidence that, damn it, what this algorithm or what this model is telling me eventually reflects reality. Now, of course, these are averages, right? So there will be trials for which you say 5% and they succeed. Now, the obvious thing there to say is, and what we like about this actually, it's that it's a true probability measure. So 5%, what does it mean, right? I don't need to tell you. 5% means 1 out of 20 should succeed. Otherwise, right. It's 5%. If every trial for which you say 5% fails, well, it's not 5%, it's 0. So if you say 5%, you should have 1 out of 20 succeeding. So you want to see that, and you do see that, which is good. Similarly, if you go to a drug developer and you say, 80%, they put it in the bank. 80%, they've never heard a higher number. In drug development, those numbers rarely exist. So 80% to a drug developer means success. Well, no, it means 2 out of 10 will fail.
Right.
So you want to see that. So you run statistical checks like the bins that I mentioned, Breyer scores, AUC. So you run a bunch of statistical tests and you get very high predictive power. Look, I'll summarize it like this. In the beginning of phase 2, which is pretty early in drug development, right? So you still have 5-6 years of development left ahead of you. The predictive power of our algorithms are about 90%. So we can tell you with 90% confidence that the probability that we give you is the right probability. When we tell you 20, it's 20. When we tell you 60, it's 60. We don't give you a 1-0 estimate. We'll give you a number, and we're 90% confident on that number.
That's a pretty bold statement. So let's think about it here, though, right? So 2 things, right? Most of this stuff at some point has to be explainable, which is typically an issue in machine learning, is the explainability of the model.
Yeah.
So how does your system, or how have you designed it in a way where you can be like, yeah, okay, this is why I got to this answer.
It's a great point. I wish we could do exactly what you said, but we can do something. We can come close. So a couple of things culturally and for the right reasons. If you go in front of the EVP of R&D in a large pharma company, or the head of portfolio, whatever, and you tell them the answer is 42, they're going to throw you out of the room. They want to know, where is the 42 coming from? Why are you telling me this? Give me some, I need to know, what can I do about it? Yeah, I need to understand it, which it's very human, and it's also the right thing to do. So we run, by design, we run machine learning models that are explainable. And there is explainability work being done in the academic community, even for, let's say, deep learning models, neural, still much less explainable than a random forest or a KNN or something like that. So we run explainable machine learning algorithms. We spend a lot of time on explainability, and if one goes on our platform or uses our software, you look at the number and then you literally click on a thing that says, explain to me why, and you see all the features that contribute to that answer and how important each feature is. So the reason I'm telling you that your probability is 42 is because on the positive side, and I'm making it up for a second, right? You've
Yeah.
picked a target that's or a gene that's highly expressed in the tissue you're going after, let's say the lung or the breast or the liver, whatever it is, the cancerous tissue versus the healthy tissue. You've designed a very good trial with the right endpoints. It's well sized with the amount of patients you're putting in. You have a biomarker, which is a good thing, blah, blah, blah. And maybe we'll also say on the negative side, by the way, you know, as a company, you may not have that much experience in this particular disease area. So I'm dinging you a little bit. And the regulator hasn't said anything special about you. You haven't received any breakthrough or accelerated approval or anything like that. And yeah, the gene you picked is highly expressed, but there has been zero. It's a first-in-class indication. It's a first-in-class molecule. There have been no approvals in the past of that target. So that tells me it's a little more risky than, you know, the 20th PD-1 in the market. So it will give you all that, and people can do two things with that. One, and perhaps less important, but important, it gives them confidence that they understand why the machine is telling something. They can wrap their head around it, and they can get more confident. Even though I can tell you, yeah, I've run the statistics and the predictive power is 90%, you want to be able to understand it. You want to touch it. You want to feel it. You want to understand why. So it does that. The second thing it does is you might be able to do something about it. So back to the simulation, right? When we helped our customer, I can maybe assess for you what the difference will be if you use the biomarker versus not. If you have a larger trial with another arm or not. If you use this endpoint versus that endpoint. So you may be able to say, okay, I understand that my probability is 42%, but if I change these three things, can I make it 50? And those 8 points in PTRS, in probability of approval, are massive in terms of NPV or whatever valuation technology you use.
That was going to be what one of my next questions is. So you're doing all this, and so do they always act on the data, or in some cases, do they make a different decision based on what the model said?
Both. And the model is not a black or white model, right? It's not going to tell you do this or don't do this, or move to phase 3 or don't move to phase 3. I'll give you an example. If you are, if you're in oncology, if I tell you that this asset has a 80% probability of success versus 60% probability of success, it probably doesn't matter. You're going to move ahead anyway. It's high enough. It's the risk is too low. You might as well do it. So sometimes, you know, at the extremes, it may not make a big difference. Whether if I tell you it's a 5% probability versus a 3% probability, do you actually care? It's pretty damn low. Now, in a lot of cases, though, they fall somewhere in the gray zone. And this is where a lot of other factors come in. So what do we think the commercial potential is? What are our competitors doing? How does it fit broadly with the rest of our pipeline and all of the other assets we both approved and phase 3 programs we have out there? So there's a lot of other considerations that go into making a decision whether I move to phase 3 or whether I de-risk it or, you know, what I do. But for the most part, what we've seen is our customers act on the information. They are able to take that information, enhance their decision-making process, and make at the end of the day a better decision. Either because they stopped something they should have stopped, they progressed something they should have progressed, or they designed a trial a little bit differently, or they you know, put a program in place that maximizes the potential of the asset they have in their pipeline. So all of those things happen. The last thing I'll say, Harry, on this one is where we see a lot of action as well is in business development. So while most of our not most actually, a lot of our work is in with R&D. So pharma companies developing their own molecules. We see two more areas where this approach is gaining a lot of steam, actually. One is business development. Mm-hmm. So as I'm looking not for my own pipeline, but as I'm looking to identify attractive programs out there that I may want to go buy or partner with or in-license and do all sorts of things. So we work with a customer early on, phase one, and they said, what are the innovative, so if you will, first-in-class assets in phase one, so risky stuff, for a particular indication, RA or IBD or Parkinson's or pancreatic cancer, whatever it is, for the indication that I care about, what are the phase one programs out there that, one, are scientifically innovative? So I don't want a me-too drug. I don't want the 21st PD-1 in the market, but I want something innovative. And two, can I see that list ranked from a risk point of view or from an attractiveness point of view? Some have a 2% chance of approval. Some have a 20% chance of approval. Well, I want to talk about the 20.
Yes.
And we've helped customers identify molecules and programs like that, where they go and they have a conversation with a biotech in South San Francisco or in Zug, Switzerland, or in Tokyo, or whatever that biotech is, about in-licensing or partnerships or acquisitions or whatever it is. So that we've seen quite a bit of action.
Yeah, the number of ideas that are going through my head right now is like, we have to have at least 5 more conversations afterwards. But
I mean, I don't know watch a 5-part series of this, but we can have
no, not on this, like separately.
I know.
But so let's just, machine learning takes hold in drug development. What's the big picture outcome? What do you think? How do you think? Is it the Intelligencias of the world that are going to change the dynamic? Is it going to be the companies themselves? But I believe this is going to have a profound impact on how things are done and what goes forward.
Here's what I'd love to see, Harry. I'd love to see, for years, we've seen, and there's some change recently, we've seen the productivity of R&D declining in our space, in pharma and biotech. I refuse to accept that in the era of a lot of data becoming available, in the era of us being able to use techniques like machine learning to do something with that data. There's got to be a way to reverse that trend, that declining trend in R&D productivity, and see it going up again. Who benefits? Patients, where they see better drugs reaching them faster and curing disease. And of course, the broader community, pharma companies, biotechnology companies, and so on. So the big picture is, I'd love to see the productivity of R&D in our space increasing. And AI, whether it's Intelligencia, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure we will be one of the players, but there will be others there, and that's great. We all need to think through, how do we reverse that trend? So in pharma or in drug development, I see that as the big picture. How do I pick the winners? How do I invest behind the winners? How do I make sure I don't create any, biases in that way, where I miss some of the drugs that would have existed had I made the right choice? And make my R&D dollars and R&D hours and effort much more productive at the end of the day for delivering drugs to people that need them.
So I saw you were quoted in a report from some law firm called Oric. I think I liked. I think you were paraphrasing Derek Lowe from Novartis, where you said, it is not that AI will replace drug developers. Yeah. It's that the drug developers who use AI will replace those who don't. Yeah. And coming back to the beginning, do you think this is happening across the board in all businesses, whether it's on experimental drugs or winning baseball teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think it is happening across all industries, but there are very different, each industry is different. So I think the scale of impact and the scale of adoption to date are very different across industries. So if I think of, we talked about, we used construction as an example earlier. If you think about construction, the impact that AI will have on construction is not zero. I've known one friend and a mentor runs a cement business, and they're using AI. I'm not joking. They're using AI in cement production to make it more environmentally friendly, increase productivity, increase yield, do all those things. So yeah, there will be impact, but it's going to be less in construction and building materials than it is in healthcare. Or it's going to be built different in financial services, let's say, that it is in travel and tourism. Again, there are opportunities for machine learning in travel and tourism, probably less than in banking or financial services broadly or healthcare. So I guess to answer your question, or to attempt to answer your question, because I don't know what the answer is, I can tell you what my bias is or my view. Yes, it will be used across industries, but the scale of impact will be materially different whether you're in healthcare or in travel. And two, the adoption to date is very different.
Yep. Well, that's why I spend all my time in the fun part of healthcare.
Look, sign me up. Sign me up.
It was great to talk to you.
No, great to talk to you.
No,
Harry.
go ahead. Finish your thought there. Finish your thought.
Going back to Derek's point, right? All this excitement about AI and all this energy and all this impact that it can have, it's fantastic, and it will have it. But let's also be thoughtful here. I think we all are, but you need experts. There is a lot of art in a lot of things that happen. There's art in drug development. There is art in baseball. There's art in a lot of things. There is instincts, gut feels that humans have. Some of it is bad because it's biased, but some of it is good.
Yes.
And you didn't miss it. There's decisions that doctors make every day as they treat patients, forget drug development, that yes, they can be made better by AI maybe. They can be guided by AI, but I'm not sure an AI will take over a physician's job anytime soon.
No, I mean, I think the two together always, at least right now, will equate to a stepwise function up, right? The AI may not miss a piece of data that the physician didn't see.
Yep.
I've been with physicians where they call it and they were missing a piece of data. Had they had that data, the decision would have been different. The machine isn't going to miss that last piece, right, necessarily. And so I think the two together can be much more powerful than anyone alone per se.
No, and it varies a lot by the actual use case. Meaning, can a machine read a lung image, or can it tell me if this picture is a dog or a cat? Yeah, probably can do it better than a human, or equally good, equally well. But in use cases that are much more intricate than looking at an image, whether it's building a baseball team or designing a phase 3 trial or anything approaching that level of complexity, the two need to come together, and will for a long time to come. So I think Derek is right in that sense, that if the ones that use drug development will replace the ones that don't, but AI by itself is not going to replace everybody, not anytime soon.
Yep, agree. Well, listen, it was great to speak to you. I look forward to continuing our conversation because I can see that there's many areas of overlap, and it's been great.
Thank you, Harry. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.